The burning line was what the Council called their last defensive perimeter. It consisted of 12 inhabited worlds arranged in a rough arc, representing the final barrier between the Devourers and the Council's core systems. Behind these worlds lay the ancient homeworlds of species that had existed for millennia. If the line fell, the Council would fall with it. High Arbiter Kalmos stood on the observation deck of Unity 7, relocated to the center of the defensive perimeter. He watched the Council's remaining fleets take up positions around the 12 worlds. It was a pitiful force compared to what had existed just months ago. The Devourers had consumed 63 worlds and destroyed hundreds of ships. What remained was barely enough to delay the enemy, let alone stop them. "How long until the human fleets arrive?" he asked his aide. "They should be here within the hour, Arbiter." Kalmos nodded slowly. He had accepted humanity's terms without hesitation, but part of him wondered if it would matter. The Devourers were unstoppable. What could humanity do that the Council could not? The answer came exactly 53 minutes later. The first human vessels dropped out of jump space at the edge of the system, and every sensor in the defensive perimeter screamed alerts simultaneously. The ships were massive, larger than anything the Council had ever constructed. The lead vessel, the Indomitable, was over 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons platforms and armored with hull plating that sensor scans could barely penetrate. Fleet Admiral Taemin Yoon stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching tactical displays that showed the entire defensive perimeter. His fleet consisted of 47 capital ships, each one a masterpiece of human engineering developed during the 3 years of independence. Behind the capital ships came 200 support vessels, carriers, destroyers, supply ships, and medical frigates. "Open a channel to Unity 7, he ordered. High Arbiter Kalmos appeared on the main view screen. The ancient reptilian's eyes widened as he took in the bridge of the Indomitable. Everything was clean, efficient, and filled with technology he didn't recognize. "Admiral Yoon," Kalmos said, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and shock. "Your vessels are impressive." "They'll do," Taemin replied. "What's your tactical situation?" "Dire. The Devourers are expected to reach the burning line within 30 hours. Our projections show they will overwhelm our defenses within 6 hours of engagement. Then we don't have much time. Transmit all your tactical data to my fleet. We'll need complete information on the Devourers' attack patterns, weaknesses, and any successful defensive strategies you've developed." Kalmos hesitated. "Admiral, we have no successful strategies. Everything we've tried has failed. Our weapons barely scratch them. They adapt to our tactics within minutes, and they regenerate damage faster than we can inflict it." "Good thing we brought different weapons then," Taemin said. "Stand by." The transmission ended and Taemin turned to his command staff. "Deploy the fleet according to Plan Omega. I want capital ships positioned at each of the 12 worlds. Carriers will maintain position in the rear, ready to deploy fighters as needed. All ships are to hold fire until the Devourers engage. I want to see what they do before we reveal our capabilities." Captain Hyun-Woo Park commanded the Indomitable's tactical systems. He had been there during humanity's departure from the Council 3 years ago. Now he was here for their return, but this time as warriors rather than diplomats. "Sir, Council vessels are requesting coordination protocols." "Granted. Send them our communication frequencies and tactical markers. We'll integrate their forces into our defensive plan." Taemin pulled up a private channel to his captains. "All ships, remember your training. These creatures are dangerous but not invincible. Stay calm, follow your orders, and trust your equipment. We've prepared for this." The wait was shorter than expected. The Devourers arrived in force 22 hours later, their organic vessels materializing from jump space in a coordinated assault that spoke to their hive mind intelligence. There were hundreds of them, ranging in size from small fighter equivalents to massive dreadnought-class creatures that dwarfed even the Indomitable. "All ships to battle stations," Taemin ordered. "Weapons free. Execute Plan Omega." The human fleet moved with precision that shocked the Council observers. Capital ships accelerated to intercept specific Devourer formations. Carriers launched fighter wings that moved in perfect coordination. Destroyers took up screening positions, their point defense systems activating in preparation for the nanomachine clouds. The Devourers released their clouds, the metallic dust spreading toward the human fleet like a deadly fog. But the human ships didn't retreat. Instead, they activated systems the Council had never seen before. Energy fields sprang up around each vessel, glowing with a blue-white light that seemed to repel the nanomachines. Electromagnetic barriers holding at 98% efficiency, Hyunwoo reported. The nanomachines can't penetrate. Taemin allowed himself a small smile. The barriers had been humanity's first major breakthrough after leaving the Council. By studying the Devourer's attack patterns from Captain Jae-sung's recordings, human scientists had developed a defense that disrupted the nanomachine's cohesion. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. All ships engage at will. Target the larger creatures first. Show them what quantum disruption can do. The Indomitable fired its main weapons. Quantum torpedoes streaked through space, leaving trails of distorted light behind them. They struck a massive Devourer creature and detonated. The effect was catastrophic. The quantum disruption tore apart the molecular bonds holding the creature together. It didn't explode. It simply came apart, dissolving into its component atoms. Across the fleet, similar weapons fired. Kinetic impactors accelerated to relativistic speeds, struck Devourer vessels with enough force to punch through their regenerative capabilities. Energy beams operating at frequencies specifically designed to interfere with organic matter cut through the creatures like surgical instruments. Commander Dae-hyun Choi led a wing of 300 fighters, smaller craft designed for speed and maneuverability. His pilots flew with a precision that came from countless hours in simulators and real combat training. They targeted the smaller Devourer organisms, the ones that served as scouts and coordinators for the hive mind. Target their communication nodes, Dae-hyun ordered. Dr. Kang's analysis says they coordinate through specialized organisms. Kill those and the rest lose cohesion. His pilots acknowledged and dove into combat. The Devourer fighters were fast and aggressive, but they couldn't match human tactics. The humans flew in coordinated pairs, covering each other, exploiting weaknesses and withdrawing before the Devourers could adapt. Within 20 minutes, half the enemy scouts were destroyed, but the Devourers were learning. They began avoiding quantum weapons and adjusting their formations to minimize damage from kinetic strikes. The battle became a contest of adaptation versus innovation, with both sides constantly evolving their tactics. Captain Hyunwoo's console lit up with warnings. Sir, Devourer forces are concentrating on our position. They've identified the Indomitable as a command vessel. Let them come, Taemin said calmly. All ships execute defensive pattern Delta. Protect the flagship, but maintain offensive operations. The human fleet shifted smoothly into a new formation. The Indomitable became the center of a defensive sphere, with smaller ships positioned to intercept any attackers. It was a bold strategy that used the flagship as bait to draw in enemy forces. The Devourers took the bait. A massive wave of creatures descended on the Indomitable, intent on destroying the human command ship. They came from multiple vectors, coordinating their attack with hive mind precision. But the human defensive formation was designed for exactly this scenario. As the Devourers closed in, the surrounding ships unleashed a devastating barrage of firepower. The creatures found themselves caught in a kill zone, taking fire from all directions simultaneously. The electromagnetic barriers held against the nanomachine clouds, while quantum weapons and kinetic impactors tore through the Devourer ranks. The Indomitable itself was not idle. Its point defense systems engaged at maximum capacity, destroying smaller organisms before they could close to ramming distance. Its main weapons targeted the largest threats, each shot precisely calculated for maximum effectiveness. Hull integrity at 87%, Hyunwoo reported. We're taking damage, but nothing critical. Taemin watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The plan was working. The Devourers had committed heavily to destroying the Indomitable, leaving other parts of the battlefield vulnerable. Human ships exploited these openings ruthlessly, picking apart the Devourer formations piece by piece. Dr. Yuna's biological weapon was deployed 3 hours into the battle. Specialized missiles carried the pathogen directly into the largest Devourer concentrations. The effect was not immediate, but within 30 minutes the enemy's coordination began to break down. Creatures that had moved with perfect synchronization started making mistakes, attacking each other, or simply drifting aimlessly in space. The pathogen is working, Hyunwoo reported. Enemy coordination down by 63%. Press the advantage, Taemin ordered. All ships maximum offensive. Let's finish this. The Parliament building in New Seoul was designed to accommodate 500 representatives from across human space. Today, every seat was filled, and the gallery was packed with observers who had traveled from distant colonies to witness the debate. The question before them was simple but carried enormous weight. Should humanity intervene to save the Galactic Council? Premier Bora Han stood at the central podium, her presence commanding immediate silence. She had led humanity through its withdrawal from the Council and overseen the remarkable growth that followed. Now she faced perhaps the most important decision of her career. "Members of Parliament," she began, "you have all seen the tactical reports from Captain Jae Sung-shin. You have read the desperate messages from High Arbiter Kalmos. You understand the threat these creatures pose. The question is not whether the threat is real. The question is whether humanity should involve itself in solving a problem that is not technically ours." Admiral Taemin Yoon rose from his seat in the military section. He was a tall man who carried himself with the bearing of someone who had spent 40 years in uniform. "Premier, if I may address the assembly?" Bora nodded and Taemin moved to the speaker's position. He activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber with tactical projections. These creatures, which our xenobiologists have designated as devourers, represent an existential threat to all biological life in this galaxy, he said. They consume organic and inorganic matter with perfect efficiency. They adapt to weapons in real time. They reproduce exponentially. The Council's military is completely incapable of stopping them. "Then let the Council fall," someone shouted from the back benches. "They cast us out. They called us warmongers and primitives. Why should we risk our lives for them?" The chamber erupted in argument. Some representatives agreed with the sentiment. Others called for immediate intervention. Bora let the debate continue for several minutes before calling for order. "Representative Dongmin, you have the floor," she said, gesturing to a young man from the Centauri colonies. Dongmin stood, his face flushed with anger. 3 years ago, the Council voted unanimously to restrict our expansion. They feared our growth, our innovation, our strength. Councillor Vexthar himself called us dangerous warmongers. They wanted us gone and we left. Now they come begging for our help. And some of you want to rush to their rescue? Where is our pride? Where is our dignity? Pride and dignity don't matter if we're all dead, a voice called out. It was Dr. Yuna Kang, who had been granted special permission to address Parliament as Chief Scientific Advisor. She stood and made her way to the central podium. Bora yielded the floor to her. "I've been studying the Devourer's behavior patterns," Yuna said, projecting her own data onto the holographic display. "They don't distinguish between Council space and human space. They don't care about politics or ancient grudges. They consume everything in their path. If the Council falls, these creatures will continue expanding. They will reach our border colonies within 2 years. They will reach New Seoul within 5. We can debate whether the Council deserves our help, but that debate becomes meaningless if we're all converted into raw matter to fuel their expansion." Admiral Taemin added his support. "Dr. Kang is correct. This is not about helping the Council. This is about survival. We can either fight the Devourers now, alongside the Council's remaining forces, or we can fight them later, alone, after they've consumed everything the Council has and use that matter to grow even stronger." Ambassador Ji-Won Lee stood from her seat. She had been silent throughout the debate, listening carefully to all perspectives. Now as she approached the podium, the chamber quieted. Everyone knew her history with the Council. Everyone knew what she had sacrificed during humanity's departure. "I understand the anger in this room," she began. "I felt it myself when the Council voted to restrict our growth. I felt it when Councillor Vexthar dismissed our contributions. I felt it when we packed our belongings and left Unity 7 for the last time. But I want to tell you something I learned during my years as a diplomat." She paused, looking around the chamber. "The measure of a civilization is not how it treats its friends. It's how it treats those who have wronged it. The Council was unjust to us. They were afraid of what we represented, and they chose exclusion over understanding. But we are better than they were to us. We have the power to save billions of lives. The question is not whether the Council deserves our help. The question is whether we will let our pride condemn entire civilizations to extinction." "They would not do the same for us," Dongmin argued. "You're right," Ji-Won agreed. "They probably wouldn't. And that's exactly why we should help them. Because we're better than they are. Because we don't abandon people to die just because they treated us badly." Because when we look back on this moment in history, I want us to be proud of what we chose. The chamber fell silent. Admiral Taman spoke again. There's another factor to consider. If we intervene, we will be doing so from a position of strength. The Council will see our true capabilities. They will understand what we've built in our 3 years of independence. He brought up new projections on the holographic display. Ships began appearing, vessels of sizes and configurations that made several representatives gasp. While the Council was congratulating themselves on getting rid of the dangerous humans we were building, we were innovating. We were creating weapons and defenses that would have terrified them. We didn't share these developments because we were no longer obligated to share anything with the Council. The ships in the display were massive, dreadnoughts that dwarfed the largest Council vessels, carriers capable of deploying thousands of fighter craft, destroyers equipped with quantum disruption weapons that could tear apart matter at the subatomic level, and more designs still in development, weapons platforms that push the boundaries of known physics. The Council's weapons can't harm the Devourers, Taman continued, but our weapons can. We've developed quantum torpedoes that disrupt the Devourers' cellular cohesion. We've created kinetic impactors that strike with enough force to overcome their regeneration. And Dr. Kang's biology division has developed a pathogen that specifically targets the Devourers' hive mind communication. Yuna nodded. It's not perfect, but in simulations it reduces their coordination by 60%. That's enough to give us an advantage. Premier Bora looked around the chamber. I'm calling for a vote. Should humanity intervene in Council space to combat the Devourer threat? All in favor? Hands rose across the chamber. Not all of them, but enough. The count was taken, verified, and announced. The motion passed with 58% approval. The motion carries, Bora declared. Admiral Tamin, you will prepare our fleets for deployment. Ambassador Lee, you will draft our terms for the Council. Make them clear. We will help, but we will do so as equals, never as subjects. The Council will formally apologize for their treatment of humanity. They will recognize our sovereignty absolutely, and they will grant us full participation in all Council decisions going forward. And if they refuse? Jiwan asked. Then we defend our own borders and let them face the Devourers alone, Bora said firmly. We're willing to help, but not at the cost of our dignity. Jiwan nodded and left to prepare the transmission. Admiral Tae-min remained behind to discuss military deployment with his staff. The chamber slowly emptied as representatives returned to their quarters to inform their colonies of the decision. In the gallery, ordinary citizens debated the choice. Some felt humanity was making a mistake. Others felt it was the right thing to do. But all of them understood that history was being made. Humanity was about to reveal its true strength to a galaxy that had dismissed them as primitives. The transmission was sent within hours. It reached High Arbiter Qualmos as he watched 3 more worlds go dark on his tactical displays. He read the terms carefully. They were harsh but fair. Humanity would help, but the price was complete recognition of human equality and sovereignty. He accepted without hesitation. Pride meant nothing in the face of extinction. Ambassador Jiwan received the Council's response and forwarded it to Premier Bora. They've agreed to all our terms. Then we're committed. Bora replied. May history judge us kindly. Admiral Taman issued the deployment orders. Across human space, fleets began mobilizing. The Council was about to learn what humanity had become in its 3 years of independence. And the Devourers were about to face an enemy they had not anticipated. The fire was coming, and humanity was bringing it. Captain Jae-sung Shin had been monitoring Council space for 6 months from the bridge of his stealth vessel, the Silent Observer. It was tedious work, watching sensor readings and recording data that might never be used. But Fleet Command wanted eyes on the Council's territory, and someone had to do the job. His orders were clear. Observe only, never engage, remain undetected. The Silent Observer was designed for exactly this purpose. Its hull absorbed sensor scans. Its engines ran cold. To any external observer, it was just another piece of space debris drifting through the void. Jae-sung had seen the steady decline of Council security over the past months. Pirate attacks were increasing. Border stations were being abandoned. The Council's military response was always too little, too late. He felt no satisfaction in watching their struggles. He had friends among the Council species, people he had worked with during humanity's membership. Good people caught in the consequences of their leaders' decisions. The alert chimed softly on his console. Something had just entered normal space near the border world of Talaxis Prime. Something large. Analysis, he ordered his systems officer. Unknown configuration, came the reply. Multiple signatures moving in formation. They're not broadcasting identification signals. Jae-sung brought up the visual feed. What he saw made his blood run cold. The ships were organic, like massive insects constructed from chitin and flesh. They moved with a grace that no mechanical vessel could match. And there were dozens of them, all converging on Talaxis Prime. Get me a secure transmission to Fleet Command, he said. Priority Alpha. Before his officer could respond, the alien ships opened fire on Talaxis Prime, but they were not using energy weapons or kinetic projectiles. Instead, they released clouds of something that looked like metallic dust. The clouds descended on the planet's surface, and the planet's distress signals began immediately. They're calling for help, his communications officer reported, broadcasting on all council frequencies. Jae-sung watched in horror as the metallic clouds spread across Talaxis Prime's surface. Within minutes, the distress signals began to change. The voices became garbled, then frantic, then silent. The planet's energy signature was fluctuating wildly. Cities were going dark one by one. Sir, the Council is dispatching a response fleet, his tactical officer reported. 17 vessels, ETA 40 minutes. Keep monitoring, Jae-sung ordered. And make sure our stealth systems are at maximum. Whatever those things are, I don't want them knowing we're here. The alien vessels finished their work on Talaxis Prime and began moving away. By the time the Council fleet arrived, the planet was silent. The response force approached cautiously, scanning for threats. Jae-sung listened to their communications, his translator converting the various alien languages into Korean. Talaxis Prime is not responding to hails, one commander reported, sending down a reconnaissance team. The team descended to the surface. What they found was transmitted back to the fleet, and Jae-sung's crew listened in growing disbelief. The planet had been stripped clean. Every building was gone. Every tree, every animal, every microorganism had been consumed. All that remained was bare rock and empty oceans. Talaxis Prime, which had been home to 3 billion beings just hours ago, was now a dead world. What could do this? His systems officer whispered. Before Jae-sung could answer, the alien vessels returned. They materialized from jump space around the Council fleet, surrounding them completely. This time Jae-sung got a good look at them. They were not ships in any traditional sense. They were creatures, living things that had adapted to survive in the vacuum of space, and they were hungry. The Council fleet opened fire immediately. Energy weapons struck the creatures' hulls, causing minor damage that regenerated almost instantly. Kinetic rounds passed through their bodies, creating holes that sealed themselves. The creatures responded by releasing more of the metallic dust clouds. They're nanomachines, Jae-sung realized. Self-replicating, designed to consume organic and inorganic matter and convert it into more of themselves. The Council ships tried to retreat, but the creatures were faster. One by one, the vessels were enveloped in the clouds. Jae-sung watched as a heavy cruiser was consumed from the outside in, its hull literally dissolving as the nanomachines broke down its structure. The crew's screams echoed across the communication channels until the ship's power failed and the transmissions died. 17 ships had entered the system. None escaped. Record everything, Jae-sung ordered, his voice tight. Full spectrum analysis. I want every detail documented. His crew worked in silence, aware that they were witnessing something unprecedented. These creatures were not conquerors. They were not invaders seeking territory or resources in any conventional sense. They were consumers, stripping entire worlds of life and matter to fuel their expansion. After the last Council ship was destroyed, the creatures moved on, heading deeper into Council space. Jae-sung waited until they were safely gone before moving the silent observer to a secure location. Get me that connection to Fleet Command, he said, and prepare a full tactical brief. The Council needs to know what they're facing. Should we warn them, sir? His communications officer asked. We're supposed to maintain observation silence. Jae-sung considered this. Humanity had no obligation to the Council. They had been cast out, dismissed as dangerous primitives. But this threat was different. These creatures would not stop at Council space. Once they consumed everything the Council had, they would continue expanding. Eventually, they would reach human territory. Transmit the data to Fleet Command, he decided. Let them decide what to do with it. but also prepare a broadcast for council channels. They need to know what's coming. Hours later, Counselor Vexthar received an emergency transmission. The message was from Captain Jae-Sung Shin of the human vessel Silent Observer. It contained full tactical data on the creatures that had destroyed Talaxis Prime and annihilated the response fleet. The message was brief and professional, containing no recriminations or demands. Vexthar studied the data with growing horror. These creatures were unlike anything in Council records. They consumed matter and energy with perfect efficiency. They adapted to weapons in real time. They moved faster than any Council vessel could match. And according to the human analysis, there were more of them coming. He prepared a transmission to human space, swallowing his pride. "Ambassador Lee," he began, addressing the woman he had dismissed 3 years ago. "The Council was wrong. We need your help. Please respond." The transmission was sent through diplomatic channels. It reached New Seoul within hours. Ambassador Ji-won Lee received it in her office, along with the tactical data from the Silent Observer. She studied both carefully. Premier Bora Han contacted her an hour later. "What do you think?" "I think the Council is facing extinction," Ji-won replied. "And I think they know it. Should we help them?" Ji-won stared at the tactical displays showing the creature's projected path. "I think we need to discuss this carefully, because if we don't help them, those things will eventually reach us. But if we do help them, we need to establish terms, clear terms. We're not rescuing them just so they can dismiss us again." "Agreed," Bora said. "Prepare a response. We'll call an emergency session of Parliament." Meanwhile, in Council space, High Arbiter Kalmos was receiving reports of 3 more worlds going silent. The creatures were spreading faster than anyone had predicted. The Council's military was in disarray, their weapons useless, their tactics obsolete. He sent another message to human space, this one more desperate. "We were wrong. Please, help us." In New Seoul, humanity debated its response while the Council's worlds burned. 3 years had passed since the last human ship departed from Council space. In that time, the galaxy had changed in ways that surprised everyone except humanity itself. Commander Dae-hyun Choi stood on the bridge of his vessel, watching the shipping lanes that crossed through what had once been called the neutral territories. These zones had been established to separate human space from Council space, a buffer that both sides had agreed upon during humanity's departure. Now those lanes were filled with human cargo ships, transport vessels, and the occasional luxury liner. Trade between human colonies had exploded once the Council's restrictions had been lifted. Another merchant convoy requesting escort through the Kesker Pass, his communications officer reported. Dae-hyun nodded. "Acknowledge their request, but inform them we don't provide escort services anymore. They'll need to hire private security." It was the 5th such request that day. When humans had been part of the Council, their military vessels had patrolled these lanes constantly, protecting merchants from pirates and ensuring safe passage for all species. Now human warships had better things to do. The independent human colonies needed protection, and Dae-hyun's fleet focused solely on human interests. The communications officer hesitated. "Sir, they're offering substantial payment." "I'm sure they are," Dae-hyun replied. "But we're not mercenaries. Our mission is to protect human assets, not solve problems for people who voted to kick us out." On a research station orbiting a frozen moon, Dr. Yuna Kang was studying data that had been streaming in for the past 6 months. She was a xenobiologist who specialized in exotic life forms, particularly those that existed in the harsh environments of deep space. Her current project was supposed to be routine, cataloging microorganisms that lived in the icy rings of the gas giant below. Instead, she had found something impossible. "Run the analysis again," she told her assistant, a young researcher named Sung Ho. "I've run it 17 times, Sung Ho replied, frustration evident in his voice. "The results don't change. There's something out there and it's getting closer." Yuna studied the readings on her screen. Deep space was never truly empty. There were always particles, radiation, and the occasional wandering asteroid. But these readings showed something different, something organized, something that moved with purpose rather than following the random drift of celestial mechanics. "Send a full report to command," she said. "Include all the raw data. Let them figure out what it means." Across human space, similar reports were accumulating. Science stations detected anomalies. Long-range sensors picked up strange signals. Automated probes disappeared without explanation. Most of the reports were dismissed as equipment malfunctions or natural phenomena. Space was vast and full of mysteries. Finding something unusual was not necessarily cause for alarm. But Lieutenant Subin Kim, an intelligence officer stationed at Fleet Command, saw patterns where others saw random noise. She had been tasked with monitoring all unusual reports from the frontier regions. As she compiled the data, a picture began to emerge. Something was probing the edges of known space. Something was testing the boundaries. She drafted a priority report and sent it directly to Admiral Tae-min Yoon, the supreme commander of all human military forces. The report was classified at the highest level. Its conclusions were disturbing but not yet conclusive. They needed more information. Meanwhile, in Council space, the absence of humanity was being felt in unexpected ways. Merchant Prince Thalrin had built his fortune on trade routes that connected 17 different Council worlds. His fleet of cargo vessels transported everything from foodstuffs to industrial equipment. For decades, his business had thrived under the protection of Council peacekeeping forces and human patrol vessels. Now, with humans gone, those protections had vanished. His latest convoy had been attacked by pirates in the outer reaches of the Deneb sector. 3 ships were lost. 17 crew members were dead. The cargo, worth millions of Council credits, was gone. The pirates had struck with impunity, because they knew no one would respond in time to stop them. Thalrin stood in the Council Commerce Ministry, pleading his case to an uninterested bureaucrat. "You must provide better security," he insisted. "The trade routes are becoming too dangerous to travel." The bureaucrat, a methane-breathing creature that communicated through a translator box, responded with mechanical indifference. "The Council is allocating resources as efficiently as possible. Perhaps you should consider hiring private security." "At what cost?" Thalrin demanded. "The expenses would make trade unprofitable." Before the humans left, their ships patrolled regularly. Pirates knew better than to attack. "The humans are no longer members of this council," the bureaucrat replied. "What they choose to do is not our concern." But it was becoming everyone's concern. Border raids were increasing. Pirate activity had tripled in the last year. Small colonies on the edge of council space were reporting attacks that would have been unthinkable when human warships had been present. The council's own military forces were stretched thin, designed more for show than actual combat. They had relied on humanity's efficiency for so long that they had forgotten how to provide security for themselves. Thalrin left the ministry in disgust. He had heard stories of human merchant fleets traveling safely through space that council vessels now avoided. The humans had not abandoned commerce. They had simply stopped sharing the benefits of their protection with others. He made a decision. If the council would not help, perhaps humanity would. He booked passage on a civilian transport heading toward human space. It was a risk. Humans were not accepting council citizens freely. Their borders were closed to all but essential travel. But Thalrin was desperate, and desperate people took risks. When he finally reached New Sol, the capital of the independent human systems, he was surprised by what he found. The city was thriving. Towers of glass and steel reached toward the sky. The streets were clean and orderly. People moved with purpose and energy. This was not a civilization in decline. This was a civilization unleashed. He managed to secure a meeting with a mid-level trade official. He explained his situation and made his offer. He would pay handsomely for human escort vessels to protect his convoys. He would accept any terms humanity proposed. The official listened politely and then declined. "We appreciate your offer, Merchant Prince, but our fleets are committed to protecting human interests. We no longer operate in council space." "But you could," Thalrin insisted. "You have the ships. You have the capability. We have no obligation," the official interrupted gently. "The council made its position clear 3 years ago. We are no longer your security force. We are no longer your engineers. We are no longer your problem solvers. You wanted us gone and we left. What happens in council space now is your responsibility, not ours." Thalrin returned to council space empty-handed. His business continued to decline as pirates grew bolder. He was not alone. Across council space, merchants, colonists, and officials were beginning to understand what they had lost. Humanity had provided more than just military protection. They had provided stability, innovation, and a willingness to help that no other species had matched. Commander Daehyun received reports of Thalren's visit to New Seoul. He read them with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. He bore no ill will toward the Council's citizens, but the Council had made its choice, and choices had consequences. On her research station, Dr. Yuna continued to monitor the anomalies in deep space. The signals were growing stronger. Whatever was out there, it was coming closer. She sent another report to Fleet Command, marking it urgent. This time people paid attention. The chamber fell silent as Ambassador Ji-won Lee stood before the assembled council. Her dark eyes swept across the vast circular room, taking in the representatives of 47 different species. Some sat in specialized tanks filled with methane. Others floated in gravity fields. A few perched on branches designed to mimic their home worlds. All of them were watching her with varying degrees of satisfaction. The vote had been cast. Humanity's expansion rights were revoked. The decision was final. Ji-won had served in this chamber for 23 years. She had negotiated trade agreements, settled disputes, and built bridges between species that had nothing in common except their membership in the Galactic Council. She had believed in this institution once. She had thought it represented something greater than any single species. Now, standing before them in her formal diplomatic robes, she understood the truth. The Council feared what it could not control. "Honored members," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation devices that hung in the air. "Humanity has heard your decision. We have listened to your concerns about our expansion. We have considered your fears about our nature." Counselor Vexthar, a tall avian creature with emerald feathers, clicked his beak dismissively. His species, the Kelvin, had been council members for 3,000 years. They viewed humanity as dangerous children playing with weapons they did not understand. "Your species has been among the stars for barely a century," he said, interrupting her. "You seek to claim territories that others have respected for millennia. Your aggression knows no bounds." Ji-won did not respond to the accusation. She had heard it countless times before. Humanity built too quickly. Humanity expanded too fast. Humanity asked too many questions. The truth was simpler and far less dramatic. Humans were efficient. They solved problems that other species had simply accepted as unsolvable. They innovated where others stagnated. And that efficiency, that drive to improve, terrified species that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. "We have been members of this council for 50 years, Ji-won continued. "In that time, we have provided medical assistance to 17 species facing epidemics. We have offered engineering support for failing infrastructure on 12 worlds. We have maintained peace in sectors that had known only conflict for centuries. We have been good citizens." High Arbiter Kalmos, the ancient reptilian who had led the council for 600 years, raised one clawed hand. His voice was like rocks grinding together. "Your contributions are noted, Ambassador Lee. But contributions do not erase concerns. Your species possesses a capacity for violence that troubles this council. Your history on your homeworld speaks to this clearly." Ji-won felt a flash of anger but kept it from her face. Yes, humanity had fought wars. They had struggled and clawed their way up from primitive beginnings. But they had also built civilizations, created art, pursued knowledge, and ultimately reached beyond their world to touch the stars. Every species in this chamber had similar histories. The Kelvin had nearly destroyed themselves in nuclear fire. The Telrathi had practiced ritual cannibalism for 5,000 years. But those histories were ancient, buried under millennia of selective memory. Humanity's past was recent, visible, and therefore unforgivable. "We understand your position," Ji-won said quietly. "And we respect this council's decision. Therefore, effective immediately, humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Council." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient sounds of the various life support systems seemed to fade. Counselor Vexthar leaned forward, his black eyes glittering. "You cannot simply leave the council, Ambassador. No species has ever. We can and we will," Ji-won interrupted. "The council charter is clear. Any member species may withdraw with proper notice. Consider this that notice. All human diplomatic staff will be recalled within the week. All human vessels will depart council space within the month. All trade agreements will be dissolved. All military cooperation will cease. All research partnerships will be terminated. High Arbiter Kalmos studied her carefully. You are making a grave mistake. The Council provides stability, protection, and access to resources that humanity cannot obtain elsewhere. Perhaps, Jiwan acknowledged. Or perhaps humanity will find that we are stronger on our own. We will discover which is true soon enough. She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the council chamber erupted into a cacophony of sounds as dozens of species began arguing simultaneously. She did not look back. Outside the chamber, Captain Hyun-woo Park was waiting. He commanded the diplomatic vessel Last Light, which had carried Ambassador Lee to this final meeting. He was a career military officer who had spent the last decade escorting diplomats and pretending that his warship was merely decorative. His gray uniform was immaculate, his expression carefully neutral. How did they take it? He asked as they walked through the curved corridors of Unity 7. About as expected, G1 replied. They think we're bluffing. They believe we need them more than they need us. Hyun-woo smiled slightly. They have no idea what we've been building in our own systems, do they? None whatsoever. They've been too busy telling us what we can't do to notice what we're actually doing. They reached the docking bay where the Last Light waited. It was a sleek vessel, smaller than the massive Council dreadnoughts, but far more advanced. The Council mandated that member species share certain technologies, but humanity had quickly learned to improve upon everything they were given. Yes, Hugh. Last Light could outrun, outmaneuver, and in a pinch outfight anything else docked at the station. As they boarded, Hyun-woo received confirmation that all human personnel had been evacuated from Unity 7. Embassies across Council space were emptying. Trade ships were returning home. Research stations were being abandoned. In some cases, civilians were choosing to stay behind. But the official presence of humanity in Council space was evaporating like morning mist. Take us home, Jiwan said as she settled into the observation deck. The Last Light undocked smoothly and accelerated away from Unity 7. Behind them, 47 species tried to understand what had just happened. They had expected protests. They had expected appeals. They had not expected humanity to simply walk away. In the council chamber, Counselor Vexthar watched the human ship disappear into the darkness of space. Good riddance to the warmongers, he said to no one in particular. High Arbiter Kalmos said nothing. He had lived for over 800 years. He had seen species rise and fall. He had watched empires crumble and new civilizations emerge. And something about the way Ambassador Lee had spoken troubled him deeply. She had not been angry. She had not been desperate. She had been relieved. That worried him more than anything else could have.